Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining me. This video is going to be a little different than normal. I'm going to be going over the first deal I ever made in real estate. I'm actually going to go back to when I developed the interest and then come through finding the deal, renovating it, renting it, evicting people, all kinds of stuff, all the way up to the point where I ended up selling it about 8 years after I bought it to another investor through owner financing. So I think it's got a lot of facets to this deal, and the other big reason I want to make this video is because many people always are telling me all of their shortcomings and reasons why they are not able to do what they see me doing. Keep in mind, you're not going to start where somebody is after been doing it for a while. I bought my first house, I believe it was in 2011, so almost 10 years ago now. And so a lot happens very quickly in that time period. 10 years doesn't really sound like that long to people kind of in hindsight, but I understand that looking forward, thinking in 10 years, that seems like a long ways away. But trust me, it is not. When I first got started and all this kind of stuff, I had very little. I drove a station wagon. It was even borrowed. I didn't even technically own it. And I had no job. No real source of income. I just transitioned out of something and moved back to where I call home from another state. And so I did not have very much established, but at the same time, I didn't have a lot of responsibility. So that was a major player in getting started. And I can understand where people with more responsibilities than I had at age 23 or 24, however old I was, you know, it can add some extra hurdles, but there might not be extra hurdles, but just different hurdles. I had about $500, I believe, when I got started, and really nothing else. So my journey basically just started in not wanting to get a traditional job. I was kind of transitioning into that time of life where I really needed to start making money. I was doing a lot of kind of novelty-based things, I guess you could say. Up until that point, I'd been in college and came out of college and did a one-year position doing something, and that was over, and I wasn't going to do another thing like that. I didn't want to get a master's degree, so I started looking at ways to make money that were not a normal 9-to-5 style job. My reasons for not wanting to do that are personal reasons, and probably reasons a lot of people identify with, is I just didn't want to go to work every single day until I was an old man, and then retire not having addressed my retirement very well, which is what a lot of people do. You can do traditional investing through your jobs, and some of that can be, I think, very fruitful, I guess you could say, but some of it's really not all that big of a deal. It's just kind of gets you to where you can get by in the later years, and that's just not what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to spend all my time basically making someone else's hopes and dreams come true, being the employer or the company that I ended up working for. So if I would have ended up getting a job, my guess is I would have ended up getting a job basically doing similar stuff that you see me doing now, but just doing it for other people. So I really saw no reason. Not having that many responsibilities, I could basically delay gratification of getting money early on, having a job, and just kind of put it off. And I'm kind of 10 years in hindsight now, I'm very glad that I did it. Things are working out nicely, all starting from a single decision, which I'll kind of address now. So I think that is good for an intro. I'm going to kind of transition out of this now into talking about the very specifics of kind of what got me started and going into the deal on my first house.
Simply said, I was not interested in working to achieve someone else's goals most of my life, only to retire at an old age. This made me look into other options, and I learned about passive income, rental income being the most common example. When I was in my early 20s, I had someone recommend I read a book titled Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Most of you will have heard of this book, but for those of you who have not read it, my biggest takeaway was an understanding of financial assets and liabilities and how cash flow functions in relation to them. Kiyosaki takes a critical-sounding approach at times, which can be a turn-off to some readers, but this is a mistake on their part, as there is so much to gain from this book. Now I look at this as a wildly simplified book, but at the time I was ignorant of certain facts, and as he points out in the book, I thought like a poor person. Fortunately, I at least knew there was a problem in my way of thinking enough to have found this book. From this book, I read others that also had a positive influence, which you will quickly discover on your own. One of the best pieces of advice I ever heard in regard to early stages of getting excited and learning about real estate, wealth building, etc. is that yes, you should read the books, but eventually you have to stop reading and start doing. Fortunately, when I got into all this, I did not have consistent internet access, and my source of finding financial books was searching the shelves on Goodwill, so that slow pace of finding those books kept me from going too crazy trying to read every last one. Obviously, these books are available on Amazon, but you can also check YouTube to see if the audiobook versions are available. When I started making a move, it involved driving around looking at houses and checking Craigslist multiple times a day. My break came when I found a house listed for $39,000 with the option of owner financing. There are, of course, many other options for finding houses, and I discussed them in my ebook, but when I started out, this was the easiest and most accessible option. Long story short, a contract was signed for $20,000. During the closing process, which was performed by a closing agency, an issue was found by the title search. It was an unreleased deed of trust from a past foreclosure. In another long story short, I negotiated the price further and purchased the house for $5,000. At the time of signing the contract, I only had a few $100s and little else to my name. To come up with the rest of the money, I sold my 1987 Suzuki Samurai and a very valuable Stanley Model No. 1 hand plane. This got me about $4,000 or so, and to come up with the rest, I sold anything I could find on eBay. The contract was for $5,000, but I also had to pay the closing costs, which totaled about $1,000. From the time of signing the contract to the closing was about 30 days. I was able to get the money together in the nick of time. Technically speaking, this was an owner financing deal where the $5,000 was a down payment and the rest would be financed over 5 years with the stipulation that the seller would resolve the title issue. Better yet, each month that went by without the problem being resolved would count as a payment made. So if the issue was not resolved in 5 years, the house would be considered paid off. And to shorten another story, that was exactly what happened and how I bought this particular house for only $5,000. June 15th, second day owning the house. I'm going to do a quick little video tour before the battery runs dead. It could happen anytime. Alright, I'm just going to do a walkthrough. This was the living room, by the way. When you walk in the front door, and you walk into this room. All the carpet. I'm going to tear it up. You can see a little bit of hardwood floors under it. It's my window. And this is my yard. It's my car. Replacement windows done by somebody. Closet. Oh, door to the back porch. Focus, low battery. Kitchen. Kitchen. That's the bathroom. The old sinkola, gas stove, washing machine. There's my dryer. Here's the bathroom. Focus. First walk through before I start tearing into the place. Focus. You know. Alright, walk back through the house. Air conditioner's running, blowing cold air. A little cheapo house, cooling off. It's my nice staircase. It looks pretty cool. Let's run upstairs before the battery runs out. Stairs. So you come up the steps, and then there's this room. It's gonna be the studio. Up the steps is a window. There's the yard again. Pretty good sized yard, bigger than everybody else's. Quality. Focus. Alright, so you go up the steps around the corner, and I have a little cool closet here. Pretty nice sized. Old plaster walls in there. The other side of the room, the steps again. My mantel piece nailed to the drywall. Then there's this little bedroom. It's kind of weird. You step up into it. And dimensions are about
11 by 16-ish, 16, 15. I think it's 16. That's how wide the house is. Narrow house. All right. Well, that concludes the interior video tour. Now maybe we'll pop outside and we'll be back for more.
The renovation of this house was quite a handful. Going back to when I first viewed it, the neighborhood was under major repair, having all the utilities replaced, which meant the streets were dug up and heavy machinery going up and down the street like tanks for a year was my constant. The house was rented at the time I viewed it by a bunch of grungy hipster girls and 2 dogs. The house smelled like a wet dog that had peed all over itself, then was sprayed with Febreze. It was pretty bad. This being my first house, I thought if a bunch of girls could live in it, how bad could it be? It's an odd little house at 1,100 square feet and technically only 1 bedroom. You enter through the front door and are met by a staircase on your left and a living room on your right. Behind the staircase is a doorway into a room. Through that room, you get to the kitchen. The kitchen has low ceilings and is also where the only bathroom is located. Going upstairs, you are met by an open room with a closet and access to the only true bedroom in the house with walls and a door. The house was completely carpeted with worn-out pea carpet, which I promptly removed. Under the carpet was sticky-back towels, which were a devil to remove, but fortunately my wife-to-be was still in hot pursuit of her man and was willing to get down on her hands and knees, laboring over removing them. Once I got the place cleaned up the best I could, removing the carpet tiles and such, I came up with a plan. I added walls to make the bedrooms real bedrooms and made repairs and improvements where I saw they were needed. Keep in mind at this time I had no job, no income from YouTube, sponsored videos, or even my woodworking. I also thought at any moment I was going to have to start making payments to the seller if the title was fixed. Not to mention I had no tools and needed to buy all the materials for the renovation. I considered getting a job for a few minutes and then decided not to as I felt it would keep me from working on the house. At about this time, the place that I worked in high school, which was my one and only job, closed down. It was an antique store that had been around for a long time and the owner decided they were done. When they shut down, the manager who worked for the owner opened up his own store under a similar name to sort of take its place in town. He was my main boss when I worked there and I had remained in contact with him for years since. I called him up and presented him with the idea of me making furniture and selling it in his store and him getting a percentage. He liked the idea, which led to me making and selling farm-style dining room tables made from reclaimed lumber. To my surprise, it took off and I fortunately never had to make payments on the house, so while the income was there from selling the tables, I did not have to spend it all paying off the house, but instead was able to use the money to fund the renovation, and even better, was able to buy my second house less than a year later, which is now one of my best rentals. I hope my reasons for telling you this are coming through, but in short, challenges that are thought of as roadblocks usually end up creating opportunity. I did not try to get around anything, but instead overcame the obstacles which created more opportunities with more problems that needed to be solved. I consider this the success snowball. It's a fork in the road where 2 people are presented the same scenario but can handle it in a very different way. Some would do what I did and come out on top, others would not. In the early stages of real estate, you don't make that much money, so having the tables be my income really kept me moving. Fast forwarding way ahead, the houses became profitable, then the renovations became a source of income in making videos, then my ebook, and so on. In my opinion, this is the American dream, being able to go from having a few $100s and nothing else but ambition to where I am now without having a single job the whole time. I continue to find ways to increase my income with minimal additional effort, but it all sprouted from making one decision and it grew from there. Replaced all of these posts you see here, all these 6x6s, and then the framework that's in between them. So, you know, all that, and then some stuff, you know, yeah, you can't really see it, but some stuff up onto there. So all this has been replaced. This is the kitchen, and this is the bathroom, this is the kitchen. And all these posts I had to replace them because they were all chewed up, nasty. It was untreated wood up on rocks in the ground before. But so I wanted to do a quick little film of it because I'm about to close it all in with this roofing tin, and then that top edge right there, I'll just sort of shim out and trim over that edge to clean it up around the porch there. And it'll be tucked up under the vinyl siding all in there. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to get a quick look at the underside before it's closed in. There's a door and there's a door on the other side. Alright. Overall, the renovation took about a year, with the most complicated tasks being light framing, repairing floor joists, and replacing the post foundation under the back of the house. With that said, it was an enormous amount of work, but once done, it really was a decent house for its age, amount invested in having a complete beginner do the work. A whole lot of people ask me how I knew what to do, and the answer is that I didn't. I just simply had to figure out the answer. At the time, all I had was a simple $10 flip phone, so being able to Google the answers was not an option at the time. Instead, I had to call people, look at books I had on the trades, and look up answers on the internet when I had access to it. In the end, I got it all done, and that's all that matters when you're just getting going. With the house complete, I needed a renter, so I went back to the same place I found the house, Craigslist. I listed the house for rent at $595. I very quickly started getting responses as the house looked pretty nice and the price was very reasonable. I quickly learned how much work it was showing a house. At the time, I lived about 40 minutes away from the house, and the level of seriousness of people wanting to see the house varied widely. I had people that were really looking for a place and practically begging me, down to people who just wanted to see inside but never intended on actually renting it. Sadly, I found out that many individuals' cost of living far exceeds their income. I don't even remember how many people I had to tell that they didn't make enough money. With a rent of $600, there were people making less than $1,000 a month trying to rent the house. Keep in mind that they would still have to pay for power, water, and many of them had children, pets, cars, etc. The number simply didn't add up. I finally found a couple that I thought was a good fit. I won't get into detail, but they made themselves look a whole lot better than they turned out to be, which is a problem I no longer have since I use a property manager. But in their case, I played the role of landlord and was duped into renting to them. They quickly became a problem, not paying on time or at all, and in multiple cases wrote me a bad check knowing they didn't have the money. After a lot of back and forth trying to get them on track, they turned nasty, so I evicted them through the normal channels. This included a 5-day pay or quit and going to the local court for the rest. They were indeed ordered to vacate by the judge despite all their many excuses. On the day that they had to leave, they did not do so, so I then had to schedule the sheriff to come out and remove them. They ended up leaving about 15 minutes before the deputy showed up, fortunately, so I didn't have to witness anything too nasty while I may have actually wanted to see it. It was a true disaster of a first experience, but just like the many other challenges that I had, became very valuable long-term in forming the way I now do things. Not that the lesson was learned was immediately put in place. Sometimes I have to learn things multiple times before they actually take hold, I guess you could say. They lived in the house for a little less than a year, but it had been about 4 months since I'd actually been inside of the house from the time they had left. The house was wrecked. My nice white walls were no longer nice white walls. My nicely painted floors were all scratched up. The house was filled with trash, nasty trash like chip bags, candy wrappers, used Q-tips, toenails, and feminine hygiene products that should have found their way into a trash can. The oddest thing I found in the house were large rocks in the floor. I'm not talking small rocks. I mean things nearing the size of basketballs and stuff. The best I could figure is that they used them underneath the bed from keeping it from sagging, but who really knows? In general, they had zero respect for the house, and I think they even trashed it on purpose as they left. They did really stupid stuff like store dirty pots and pans under the kitchen sink, which messed up the cabinets, and even attracted mice, which then peed and pooped all over the place, pretty much wrecking the cabinets. Well, I guess they could have dumped it all down the drain and caused a bigger problem. They dumped cooking grease over the handrail on the side porch right down the side of the house, creating a lot of other problems as well. I'm certainly not going to act like a saint, but I can be pretty understanding of a lot of people's problems. But in the case of these people, they just suck. They did everything wrong and only blamed others. Okay, so that's the whole house. Just left all their trash here. It's nasty people. After they were gone, I needed a break from this house and fortunately had my second house by then and was working on that renovation. Even after finishing the second house and having it rented, I still let the first house sit for a bit before working on getting it rented again. It ended up costing me about $3,000 to get it back into shape, but I took the opportunity to rearrange the bathroom and make other small improvements while I was at it. This time I decided to rent the house out through the Section 8 program due to a recommendation from other landlords. In short, Section 8 is federally subsidized housing. This also meant that I had to meet their standards, which is why I ended up carpeting the house and making a host of other small arbitrary changes. The house quickly rented once listed through Section 8, but again quickly became a problem. I won't get into my opinion about it all, but there's a good deal of abuse that happens with these programs and negative effects due to very little accountability on the renter's part. At this time of my life, I was basically breaking even financially and had no net income, while my tenant received around $36,000 through the many programs she was on and had no job. To be clear, there are many people that can get something out of these programs. There's a whole bunch of people that weasel their way onto them that don't really need them, and this was one of those cases. The tenant stayed for about a year and then dipped out once the house was no longer in good condition and she had ragged it out from a lack of respect and abuse. There were times that I had to go to the house for a repair and there would be 20 people or more in the middle of the week. It was clear that there were certain periods where there were 10 or more people living in the house when there was only supposed to be 2 adults and 1 child on the lease, which is the maximum allowed through the program since they were the ones getting the actual subsidized housing. Once they left, I vowed to never rent this house again and stuck to it. I let it sit for a couple years while I moved on to better things. This may sound stupid, but I needed to let it sit for the 5 years to run out on the payments. I canceled the insurance and wrote it out. It was broken into multiple times throughout the wait, but fortunately was not vandalized, but instead used as a hangout. Sometime around finishing the $12,000 house and buying the $9,000 house, I decided I needed to do something. So I upgraded the electric to 200 amps, made some repairs, and got it looking okay again, and started in on trying to resolve the title issues. Assuming it would be not that big of a deal, I listed it for sale on, yet again, Craigslist. I put a high price on it, somewhere around $70,000, just to see what would happen. Not much happened, so I dropped it to the high 50s. I got a few bites, but no one was interested at that price after seeing it. Around this time, I got very motivated to sell it, so I dropped the price to $40,000, and I got a good response, one which was serious. A contract was signed at full price, and the deal was that I would owner finance it over 7 years with $6,000 down. I ended up not being able to resolve the title issues before the closing date and had to let the buyer back out of the contract. After trying everything my real estate attorney could try, I called the buyer back up, explained the situation to him all over again, and offered him the house at $30,000 with the same terms and only $4,000 down. To my surprise, he took the deal. I just wanted to toss it out there knowing it was a slim chance, but then in the end, he took it. The deal closed 1 week later, and the buyer has sent me every single payment on time. Was this house worth all the hassle in financial terms? Heck no. But it got me started, taught me a lot about renovations, drastically improved my problem-solving skills, learned a lot about negotiating, and the list goes on and on. While it's small potatoes for all that went into it, I now receive a $415 check every month without any of the overhead of owning the property or the responsibilities of renting. It's by far the most I've ever made off this house and is zero hassle. It also gave me the idea to buy houses just for the purpose of turning and selling them with owner financing to make a profit off the sale and from financing. Basically, I can keep some houses that I want to keep as rentals and then sell the other ones that I come across that I would rather not keep with owner financing. It's a great way to sell a house that might not qualify for bank financing, as well as to spread out your income over several years for tax purposes. I also think it's a great retirement strategy. An investor can accumulate lots of rental property throughout their entire life. Then later on, when they're ready to retire, they can start selling it, offering owner financing. One of the biggest advantages of rental income is that it is not subject to self-employment tax since it is taxed as passive income. But when you go to sell that property, it is subject to the full taxes. But by offering owner financing, you're spreading that income out to where you don't get this huge jump in income, and hopefully that keeps you down in a lower tax bracket. In the long term, you will get all the money plus more taxed at a lower rate. There are other advantages as well, both obvious and subtle. The obvious being that you'll be making more than just the sale price. You'll also be making the interest on the loan itself, and owner financing rates are on the higher side of things, often double or more than normal bank rates. It may just be a way of thinking about it and no real advantage, but owner financing is just a loan, but I see it as a loan that you can extend without actually costing you a dime. In the case of properties you purchase with cash and rent it for years, and at this point in your career, you're cashing out. So the idea of selling, getting all your money just to reinvest it is not what you're looking to do. Owner financing also gives you the option to sell less than desirable houses to people who want financing. Oftentimes, as already mentioned, certain houses are not able to be financed traditionally, and many buyers can't get financing but are people who would be able to make the payments. You can use your discernment and look at them in a way that traditional lenders cannot. On the topic of interest rates, it really depends on the situation. The more normal the situation, the more normal the interest rates will be. I see owner financing interest rates float anywhere from a point or two above normal rates to around 10%. This may seem really high to some, but consider the sale price. If you're selling a house and the balance to be financed is $10,000 over just a couple-year term, it isn't enough balance or time to make that much interest. So you charge enough interest to make it worth your time. The other side of the coin, if you're selling a house where something like $100,000 is being financed over 20 or 30 years, you can charge a pretty normal rate and make a boatload. The lowest owner financing rate that I've seen was 0%, where the seller just wanted to get out of the house and wanted to make it easy. On the highest side of things, I've seen them exceed the legal limits. States have limits on how high interest rates can be charged, but in some cases, person to person, people just do what they want to do. I'm not recommending it, I'm just telling you what I've seen. Well, that pretty much wraps things up, but I'm sure I'm leaving something important out, so feel free to ask questions. I think the main takeaway should be that you don't always have to have everything that you think you need or know all that is required to get started in real estate. You can come up with the money, you can find cheap houses, you can learn all the different things you need to know how to do, and you can get the tools and supplies as you go. Like I've said before, just pretend you know what you're doing and get started. I'm on the way to a closing to sell this house, and I wanted to show it an update on it real quick on the inside, and the battery is about to die, so I have to hurry up. So let me get inside. I did not realize the battery was in this condition. So this is the first house I ever bought. Living room. Staircase goes right upstairs. It's got painted wood floors. All the walls are painted. Understair storage. It's the hallway. Bedroom. So it has vinyl replacement windows in it. Then there's the kitchen. So this house is kind of a pieced together type house, I think, with additions over the years, kind of low ceilings. But I installed these new cabinets, new floor, and then here's the bathroom. We get the light turned on for you. Nothing much to it, is what it is, but everything is functional. It's the door to the back porch. So this house has a heat pump, and everything is electric, including the water heater and all that. So it's all freshly painted, and the carpets were used by the last tenant, but they're clean. Sorry, camera loses focus in low light with white walls. Little closet over there. I replaced all the blinds. Somehow tenants always tear those to shreds. So that is the whole thing. That's quick, but the battery is about to die, and I have to be at the closing for selling this house in 30 minutes. So maybe I will talk a little bit more about this house afterwards. But that is the gist. 2 stories, about 1,100 square feet, vinyl siding, middle of the city, sits on a double lot, and she sold. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Again, I know it's not the norm, and I get a lot of those comments anytime I start talking where people just say, I just wish you'd be quiet and get back to work. And but to reemphasize the reason I even have this channel, it's to encourage people and to show them sort of the process of doing the type of stuff that I'm doing. And that's not to glorify what I'm doing or make it seem any more special than it is, but it really does offer a lot of freedom and another option to those out there who just are not comfortable with normal ways of going about making money, looking for something that frees up time and something that has less of a ceiling on it. You know, I'm sure that my personal limitations, how smart I am, my skill level, all the rest of it, you know, that puts a cap on things to a degree. But at the same time, with this type of stuff, you can continue to educate yourself. You can continue to improve how you go about things. So it's basically
limitless as far as what you can achieve. And for me, what I want to do is I want to get to this point. I don't know exactly what that point is, but I'll feel it and I'll know it when I get there, where basically I just want to make this amount of income that makes me feel very comfortable, and it gets to that point where I don't have to constantly keep the wheels spinning, where it just sort of runs on its own. And 10 years after getting started, I'm not there, but at the same time, I haven't done the best job in getting there. I've had sort of times of where I've paused for a few years and really hadn't done much. And then ways I've gone about things are certainly less than efficient. And then making these videos also slows me down. But I guess you could say that it has done good enough to give me the freedom to do things that are novelties, like have a YouTube channel. And unfortunately, the YouTube channel grew into something significant enough to supplement the income and be worth it. And it all comes back to the decisions I made early on, which the initial decision was just to look into doing something different. And I guess that would be what I'd encourage you to do, is just try to think differently. And when you start thinking differently, or attempting to think differently, you will, and you'll seek out new information. And for me, again, this isn't a video pushing Rich Dad Poor Dad, but that just happened to be the book that I read that just made something click in my head. And it basically, the light switch was in my head, and that book just flipped it, is I guess the best way of phrasing it. I don't know, it probably sounded silly. But thank you again for watching the video, and I encourage you to check out my ebook and the cash contract if you have not already. And then if you're like the idea of selling tables, I did another book on developing those tables as a product, not specifically to talk about farm tables, but just to kind of talk about developing a product that fits the market that you are in. There'll be a lot more links in the description. Most importantly, the first link in the description to Squarespace, the sponsor of this video. So be sure to support the sponsors of the channel. Let them know that you appreciate them sponsoring my videos and other videos that you enjoy watching. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
Squarespace gives people a powerful and beautiful online platform from which to create your website. Be among the growing community of makers and creatives who choose Squarespace to express their creative visions. Squarespace has the tools you need to get your business off the ground, including e-commerce templates, inventory management, a simple checkout process, and secure payments. Whatever you sell, Squarespace has the merchandising features to make your products look their best online. Every design automatically includes a unique mobile experience that matches the overall style of your website, so your content will look great on every device, every time. If desired, you can disable the mobile view from your website manager. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/homematehome to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video.